All right, everyone, as the midterms approach, there's something that has nothing to do with elected officials themselves. Well, at least not in anything other than a roundabout way, and that's marijuana on ballot initiatives. You've got to realize during these elections, at least in most states, voters sometimes, if enough petitions have been circulated and certified and it gets printed on ballots and they pay their fee and everything, you can put a proposition before the whole voting public within a state. Shall we or shall we not impose some law, this ordinance, appoint this council, various things that you can and cannot do. California, their voters actually voted to legalize years before it ended up legal, and the courts had to come in because the state government attempted to invalidate the ballot initiative. They said, no, because it's still federally illegal, we're just going to ignore the voters even though they properly passed this ordinance by a significant margin through the normal legal process. The court said, no, at least on the state level, the state government can't do anything. Yeah, it contradicts federal law. There's nothing the state government can do about it, though. It's illegal for them to try to invalidate it. So you've got Michigan, Utah, Missouri, Ohio, and Wisconsin. Actually, 5 states. Sorry, because I think I always forget about Ohio because they defeated it the last time around. And as promised in the Canada marijuana video, I got to talk about the different methods behind legalization or behind progress on marijuana in one respect or another. The best thing that can happen is a situation really like what Vermont has, where it's legal for personal possession. You can have pot on you. You can't, DUI still applies. Public intoxication laws and ordinances still apply. You're on your property, though, you have your little green bag. No one cares. You can grow several plants. And in the state of Vermont, I think it's 2 mature plants or up to 6 immature. I guess the idea is that during that growing cycle, you're doing it in batches. So you'd plant 2 plants, wait like a month or so, and plant 2 more. Therefore, you'll always be harvesting. You'll never exceed the allowable total. The thing is, though, the amount of weed that you'll be producing is far in excess of what one person typically is going to smoke. And if you have a family of 5, that means you could have up to 10 mature plants at one time. That's a lot of marijuana, especially when you consider that there's still a regulation on how much you can possess of the final product at any given time. It almost begs the question, is the state telling people, hey, fucking give out weed to your inner circle of friends and family, or sell it within those inner circles under the table? Yeah, basically. The state, they're not saying that. It would be highly irregular if they did, but really, that's what's going to happen. I think they know that. They're comfortable with that. The Democratic supermajority there knows that marijuana is not a problem. It was decriminalized in this state for half a decade anyway. New Hampshire just barely got around to decriminalizing it. So much for live free or die. You don't even have legal marijuana yet. Ha ha ha. You have to buy it from Vermonters. It's funny. A disclaimer, of course. You're not allowed to take it over state lines. That's the one situation which the federal government has an actual constitutional right to legislate on marijuana at all, as if it's actually interstate commerce. Otherwise, technically speaking, the entire drug war is basically all unconstitutional. It's just that nobody wants to challenge it. And the prison complex, the police unions, for some reason up until recently, have supported the drug war. And now I think they're backing off. The police are tired, I think, of raiding Harold the Happy Hippie and potentially getting shot by someone for having a fucking pot plant. It's come on, let the cops go after murderers and thieves and stuff like that. But then you have the second possibility, which is something like what Colorado has, where personal possession legal, larger amounts basically decriminalized. You can still get it confiscated if it's too much, but you have to, in order to sell, it's dispensary level. To grow, anyone can grow, but they have to take a class, buy a license, and so forth. So you can produce and you can consume freely, but it is somewhat regulated on one end. Then you have sort of the Washington State style model, where I believe the production is also more heavily regulated. So consumption is still legal, possession's legal, but everything else is basically state-run. And then you have Ohio, their initial attempt. And this was held up by the regressives, by the idiot moralists in this country as a stunning victory for anti-pot forces. It was actually not. What Ohio, their initiative that they were voting on, I think in 2014, what it would have done is it would have built a state monopoly. This is the worst possible legalization you can have, where the state grows it, state contractors, the state fixes the prices, no competition allowed. You can only possess it, you can only get it from licensed dispensaries. There are all sorts of regulations associated with use. I don't agree with that, and in any of these cases, the state-level voters should probably look at these initiatives and figure out exactly what they entail. If that attempt is made, you should shoot it down. Don't even bother legalizing, because very soon it'll be federally legal. There will be no reason for states to attempt to establish monopolies, but up until then you might get some shenanigans like we had in Ohio. I believe 2 of these 5 states are just decriminalizing, but at that point, I believe we've hit pretty much the tipping point. It's like with gay marriage. Once you had enough momentum behind and enough states had legalized gay marriage, it was inevitable that it was going to become federally legal, federally recognized. The death knell of the war on gay marriage or whatever had really come years before. You see that now, I think, with marijuana, really over the last election and this one. You have more and more states joining the chorus of they want medical marijuana, certainly. That's legal basically everywhere. Half the states now have decriminalized or legalized, and I think about a third have legalized. Assuming that these all pass, it'll be more than that. At that point, most of the country has, come to its senses. It becomes impossible, really, to enforce on the federal level. Now, the Trump administration has already signaled a willingness to work on this issue. I wouldn't be surprised if over the next couple of years, Sessions will probably get fired after the midterms. Regardless of what happens, Sessions is probably out. The hope is that Trump is going to appoint someone there. Go ahead and gun after Mueller all you want. As far as marijuana goes, respect the states, make the case, and this would be a proper constitutional case. Federal government doesn't have a right to legislate on marijuana. The drug scheduling system is scientifically inaccurate. It's based on emotion, not upon reason. It's not prefaced on a constitutional amendment legalizing the system to exist in the first place. I use the comparison to Prohibition. When Prohibition was passed in the United States, it was legal. Prohibition was legal. Because they made a constitutional amendment, some people wanted to pass a simple law banning alcohol. It was reasonably construed as being unconstitutional until they changed the Constitution, because they realized that the government had no specific right. The legislature was not given the right to legislate to mandate that citizens could or could not consume a good. Therefore, they had no choice but to pass a constitutional amendment. With the drug war, no constitutional amendment has been passed. Basically, the courts have simply misconstrued interstate commerce to somehow have to do with things that aren't interstate. And so the federal government has unlawfully appropriated the ability to legislate on an issue that should belong just to the states and municipalities. Now, I would say it's an individual rights issue. The idea that the state should ban what is scientifically recognized within legitimate health communities as medicine, at least for medical purposes, or that the state would give undue levels of punishment for what amounts to a minor infraction in the minds of anyone who ever used marijuana, I think is tyrannical, I think is nonsensical. Conservatives should be against it on a fiscal basis. It's extremely expensive to police. Liberals should be against it on a moral basis. It's simply unethical. Libertarians, by and large, are against it. And then you've got like the far left. Why would anyone give a fuck? Even the evangelicals now are like, yeah, it's God's plant. He did invent it. Satan didn't come out of the ground and make marijuana. It was always there. Early Christians probably smoked up anyway. They were using other stuff and drinking all the time, even though back then. What passed for wine in antiquity wouldn't be used today. Like, it would have all been sour unless it was literally boiled in lead vessels to sweeten it. By the way, a good way to get brain damage, old Roman tradition, they actually charged you double for the good wine. The sweet wine that was literally giving you lead poisoning, yeah, they would make you pay for that. Sort of like tobacco products. The only regulation I favor, what I favor in nationwide legalization is no taxes, no significant regulations, let the states handle it. The states are all going to end up legalizing because it'll be unenforceable. The states should be encouraged to adopt the Vermont model. Let people grow small amounts, let them, if they want to give a bud to their friends, really, the state should not have any business in that. Set the age to 18 for purchasing for normal consumption. I think here it's 21. I don't see why. It's like, yeah, okay, you're old enough to go fight in some fucking godforsaken desert, but God forbid you should smoke this plant. I don't know. I've never been a proponent of the drug war. This includes, like, when I was religious. Like, I've told this story, like, when I was back in high school, and they sort of bring in the scare 'em straight bullshit, the moralistics. And keep in mind, this is blue state Vermont, in a school, in a high-ranked school, Mill River, a very good school, but in health class, basically they did the, hey, if you have sex, you'll get pregnant and have STDs, And if you use marijuana, it's a gateway drug. They still like brought people in that were saying that stupid shit, including some dude. I have a feeling he was a con. And they knocked, and as part of his plea deal or to knock time off his sentence, they would take him in, put him before high school classes, and have him tell lurid tales of all the psychedelics he uses. He was talking about using mescaline root, which isn't even a real thing. And I'm sitting there at the time, being wise enough to have studied it, I'm sitting there chuckling and asking him, hey, so you oppose medical marijuana, which was well, his position. I'm like, okay, what about morphine? He's like, well, we can already give them things for pain, so they don't need marijuana. Yes, you can give them opiates. Wonderful. Guess one time I got sent to the office for questioning the drug war in my TA period. Because we had one of those little sheets, one of those propaganda things, it was like Dare Week or some bullshit. And it was like this story about this kid, he starts smoking pot, pretty soon he alienates everyone. The next time that the young virginal cheerleader kid meets him, like, you know, when she's about to go to college, he's like a washed up, drunken hippie, he's strung out on heroin, he's homeless and disheveled and smells like shit, like a fucking garbage dump. And it's like, yes, if you smoke marijuana, this will reasonably be construed as happening. Obviously, you will end up homeless and on heroin. And it's like bullshit. And at the time when I was reading it, at the end I was laughing and the TA was like, what's so funny? I'm like, oh, this is funny because it's propaganda. Oh, you gotta go to the office. I thought that was hilarious. Well, you know, guess who was in the right historically speaking? It wasn't the teachers. You know, you should question all authority. The left needs to learn this again. That's about all. Peace out.